Good morning, grade fives, and welcome to another English lesson with me, Miss Kun. I hope that you are all well, that you are enjoying the odd days where it's beautiful and sunny, because it's quite chilly at the moment here in Johannesburg. So I hope wherever you are warm, you are doing well, you slept really well, you're energized, and you are ready to learn. Remember that please, if you've got any questions, email them to grade5@worksheetcloud.com. All right, so for those of you that remember, we are busy reading Kensuke's Kingdom together. We're learning more about Kensuke's Kingdom. We haven't yet come across Kensuke or we haven't learned who exactly Kensuke is and what is so special about his kingdom. But we have been introduced to some of the main characters. We have a little bit more of an understanding of what happened on the actual boat. And we, at the end of chapter 3, we left off with Michael and Stella that had fallen overboard in the ocean. So today we are going to be looking at chapter 4 and we're going to learn and see what's going to happen. So with that in mind, remember that Kensuke's Kingdom is written by Michael Morpurgo, and we are going to carry on with chapter 4. So here is the picture for those of you that can see of what chapter 4 is going to look like. It is quite a large chapter, so I'm going to be doing chapter 4 in 2 parts. So this is going to be part 1. Now this chapter is called Gibbons and Ghosts. The terrors came fast, one upon another. The lights of the Peggy Sue went away into the dark of the night, leaving me alone in the ocean, alone with the certainty that they were already too far away, that my cries for help could not possibly be heard. I thought then of the sharks cruising the black water beneath me, scenting me, already searching me out, honing in on me, and I knew there could be no hope. I would be eaten alive. Either that, or I would drown slowly. Nothing could save me. I trod water, frantically searching the impenetrable darkness about me for something, anything to swim upwards. There was nothing. Then a sudden glimpse of white in the sea. The breaking of a wave, perhaps, but there were no waves. Stella! It had to be! I was so thankful, so relieved not to be all alone. I called out and swam towards her. She would keep bobbing away from me, vanishing, reappearing, then vanishing again. She had seemed so near, but it took several minutes of hard swimming before I came close enough to reach out and touch her. Only then did I realize my mistake. Stella's head was mostly black. This was white. It was my football. I grabbed it and clung on, feeling the unexpected and wonderful buoyancy of it. I held on, treading water and calling for Stella. There was no answer. I called and I called, but every time I opened my mouth now, the seawater washed in. I had to give her up. I had to save myself if I could. There was little point in wasting energy by trying to swim. After all, I had nowhere to swim to. Instead, I would simply float. I would cling to my football, tread water gently, and wait for the Peggy Sue to come back. Sooner or later, they had to discover I was overboard. Sooner or later, they would come looking for me. I mustn't kick too much, just enough to keep my chin above the water. Oh, I've lost my place. Too much movement would attract the sharks. Morning must come soon. I had to hang on till then. I had to. The water wasn't that cold. I had my football. I had a chance. I kept telling myself that over and over again, but the world stayed stubbornly black about me, and I could feel the water slowly chilling me to death. I tried singing to stop myself from shivering, to take my mind off the sharks. I sang every song I could remember. but after a while I'd forget the words. Always I came back to the only song I was sure I could finish, 10 Green Bottles. I sang it loud again and again. It reassured me to hear the sound of my own voice. It made me feel less alone in the sea. And always I looked for the grey glint of dawn. But it would not come, and it would not come. Eventually I fell silent, and my legs just would not kick anymore. I clung to my football, my head drifting into sleep. I knew I mustn't, but I couldn't help myself. My hands kept slipping off the ball. I was fast losing the last of my strength. I would go down to the bottom of the sea and lie in my grave amongst the seaweed and the sailors' bones and the shipwrecks. The strange thing was that I didn't really mind. I didn't care. Not anymore. I floated away into sleep, into my dreams. And in my dream I saw a boat gliding towards me, silent over the sea. The Peggy Sue! Dear, dear Peggy Sue! They had come back for me. I knew they would. Strong arms grabbed me. I was hauled upwards and out of the water. I lay there on the deck, gasping for air like a landed fish. Someone was bending over me, shaking me, talking to me. I could not understand a word that was being said, but it didn't matter. I felt Stella's hot breath on my face, her tongue licking my ear. She was safe. I was safe. All was well. I was woken by a howling, like the howling of a gale through the masts. I looked about me. There were no masts above me. There were no sails. No movement under me either. No breath of wind. Stella our tortoise was barking, but some way off. I was not on a boat at all, but lying stretched out on sand. The howling became a screaming, a fearful crescendo of screaming that died away in its own echoes. I sat up. I was on a beach, a broad, white sweep of sand, with trees growing thick and lush behind me, right down to the beach. Then I saw Stella prancing about in the shallows. I called her, and she came bounding up out of the sea to greet me, her tail circling wildly. When all the leaping and licking and hugging were done, I struggled to my feet. I was weak all over. I looked all about me. The wide blue sea was as empty as the cloudless sky above. No Peggy Sue, no boat, nothing, no one. I called again and again for my mother and my father. I called until the tears came, and I could call no more, until I knew there was no point. I stood there for some time trying to work out how I had got here, how it was that I had survived. I had such confused memories of being picked up, of being on board the Peggy Sue. But I knew now I couldn't have been. I must have dreamt it. Dreamt the whole thing. I must have clung to my ball and kept myself afloat until I was washed up. I thought of my football then, but it was nowhere to be seen. Stella, of course, was unconcerned about all the whys and wherefores. She kept bringing me sticks to throw, and would go galloping after them into the sea without a care in the world. Then came the howling again from the trees, and the hackles went up on Stella's neck. She charged up the beach, barking and barking, until she was sure she had silenced the last of the echoes. It was a musical, plaintive howling this time, not at all menacing. I thought I recognized it. I had heard howling like it once before on a visit to London Zoo. Gibbons. Funky gibbons, my father had called them. I still don't know why to this day, but I loved the sound of the word funky. Perhaps that was why I remembered what they were. It's only gibbons, I told Stella. Just funky gibbons. They won't hurt us. But I couldn't be at all sure I was right. From where I now stood, I could see that the forest grew more sparsely up the side of a great hill some way inland, and it occurred to me then that if I could reach the bare rocky outcrop at the summit, I would be able to see further out to sea. Or perhaps there'd be some house or farm further inland, or maybe a road, and I could find someone to help. But if I left the beach and they came back looking for me, what then? I decided I would have to take that chance. I set off at a run, Stella Artois at my heels, and soon found myself at the cooling shade of the forest. I discovered a narrow track going uphill in the right direction, I thought, so I followed it, only slowing to a walk when the hill became too steep. The forest was alive with creatures. Birds cackled and screeched high above me, and always the howling wailed and wafted through the trees, but more distantly now. It wasn't the sounds of the forest that bothered me, though it was the eyes. I felt as if I was being watched by 1,000 inquisitive eyes. I think Stella did too, for she had been strangely quiet ever since we entered the forest, constantly glancing up at me for reassurance and comfort. I did my best to give it, but she could sense that I too was frightened. What had seemed at first to be a short hike now felt more like a great expedition into the interior. We emerged exhausted from the trees, clambered laboriously up a rocky scree, and stood at long last at the peak. The sun was blazing down. I had not really felt the burning heat of it until then. I scanned the horizon. If there was a sail somewhere out there in the haze, I could not see it. And then it came to me that even if I were to see a sail, what could I do? I couldn't light a fire. I had no matches. I knew about the cavemen rubbing sticks together, but I had never tried it. I looked all round me now. Sea, sea, sea. Nothing but sea on all sides. I was on an island. I was alone. The island looked perhaps 2 or 3 miles in length, no more. It was shaped a bit like an elongated peanut, but longer at one end than the other. There was a long swathe of brilliant white beach on both sides of the island, and at the far end another hill, the slope steeper and more thickly wooded, but not so high as mine. With the exception of these twin peaks, the entire island seemed to be covered with forest. So far as I could see, there was no sign of human life. Even then, as I stood there that first morning, filled with apprehension at the terrifying implications of my dreadful situation, I remember thinking how wonderful it was. A green jewel of an island framed in white, the sea all about it a silken shimmering blue. Strangely, perhaps comforted somehow by the extraordinary beauty of the place, I was not at all downhearted. On the contrary, I felt strangely elated. I was alive. Stella Artois was alive. We had survived. I sat down in the shadow of a great rock. The gibbons set up a renewed chorus of howling and hooting in the forest, and a flock of raucous birds clattered up out of the canopy of the trees below us and flew off across the island to settle in the trees on the hillside opposite. "We'll be all right," I told Stella. "Mum and Dad, they'll come back for us. They're bound to. They will. They will. Mum'll get better and they'll come back. She won't leave us here. She'll find us, you'll see. All we've got to do is keep a lookout for them and stay alive. Water. We'll need water. But so do those monkeys, right? We've just got to find it, that's all. And there must be food too. Fruit or nuts, something. Whatever it is that they eat, we'll eat." It helped to speak my thoughts out loud to Stella, helped to calm the panic that came over me now in waves. More than anything, it was Stella's companionship that helped me through those first hours on the island. It seemed to make sense not to plunge at once into the forest looking for water. To be honest, I was too frightened anyway, but rather to explore the shoreline first. I might come across a stream or river flowing out into the sea, and with a bit of luck, on the way I might find something I could eat as well. I set off in good spirits, leaping down the scree like a mountain goat. Where monkeys lived, I reasoned, we could live. I kept telling myself that. I soon discovered that the track down through the trees was bereft of all edible vegetation. I did see fruit of sorts. What looked to me like fruit anyway. There were coconuts up there too, but the trees were all impossible to climb. Some rose 100 feet, some 200 feet from the forest floor. I had never seen such giants. At least the intertwining canopy did provide welcome relief from the heat of the day. All the same, I was becoming desperately parched now, and so was Stella. She padded alongside me all the way, her tongue hanging. She kept giving me baleful looks wherever our eyes met. There was no comfort I could give her. And I'm going to pause right there. So that is the end of Chapter 4, Part 1. And in the next video, I will be reading Chapter 4, Part 2. And we will find out a little bit more about Chapter 4. So with that, boys and girls, I would like to thank you for listening to me and for joining me on the story of Kensuke's Kingdom. I don't know about you, but I'm really enjoying this book. I just want to find out what's going to happen. I can't wait to meet Kensuke and find out who this mysterious person is. And I'm sure we'll find out exactly what more Michael comes across, who he meets, what is on this island, and I'm sure we'll find out more in Part 2 of Chapter 4. So until next time, have a wonderful day. Hakuna Matata, and remember, be kind to one another. Bye.